There we go, and we are live with episode 40. That's right, 40. 40. Amazing, of Practical Chrome. Welcome everybody to Practical Chrome, the show dedicated to everything Chrome-based, right? So you've got the Chrome browser that is on basically every single device out there, and its awesome syncing capability, all of its retaining of all your awesome bookmarks, things like that. Then you have the Chromecast, and then you have the Chrome books, you have Chrome boxes, you have Chrome bases. We cover it all. Maybe too much, but I like to take on too much. So, everyone, welcome, and of course, welcome my co-hosts James Welbus and Craig Tumbleson. Gentlemen, how has our week been?
It's all right.
Just all right. All right. That's. Come on. I need some color here, gentlemen. Craig, give me some color.
What are we doing here, John?
We're doing episode 40 of Practical Chrome. Guys,
yeah, listen, John. Tomorrow, we are expecting Google to release Android L. And as great as it's going to be in terms of new technology, all we really care about is what the name's going to be. So, it's like Christmas Eve right now. We need to be in bed sleeping, John. Because the sooner we go to sleep, the sooner we're going to find out what the name is, and the sooner we're going to figure out how much money we each want.
Oh, I see. See, I did not realize this. And who exactly is Santa Claus in this crazy metaphor of yours right now?
Probably Google. I'm not really sure, because, again, it's just a metaphor. Don't read too much into it. But I've got like $600 on LMP for the naming, which is lemon pie. I know James thinks it's going to be lollipop, which is fine. But, you know, it's important to me that we find out what the name's going to be. So I don't know what we're doing here tonight.
What about lemon meringue?
For the record, I've never actually guessed publicly what the L stands for.
Which defaults to lollipop.
So James defaults to lollipop, according to Craig. What about lemon meringue?
That's my bet.
So you're going lemon meringue.
Of course.
That's a stupid name.
Listen, man.
What a delicious dessert.
It is. It is. It's a good point. All right. Well, there we go. See, this is the start of episode 40, and ladies and gentlemen, this is the episode that you're going to want to catch up with us, because we've been gone now for about like 4 weeks at this point, because I have not had a chance to post the other episodes. So, that being said, we will post both episodes probably at the same time, so that everyone will get a good 2-week fix of Practical Chrome. So, awesome. No sponsors right now. Again, just because of the fact that we have been delayed, things like that. I don't want to. I want to be able to put forward the best for our sponsors, and I can't do that right now. So I've asked them to kind of hold off. So, but you know, definitely if you catch older episodes, definitely check out our sponsors. But anywho, gentlemen, let's start off with the news. I wanted to. There was one thing that I had to look at, and I of course I didn't get a chance to share it with you. I know that we were looking at Craig. You and I were talking about things crazy off the beaten path, like Georgia Guidestones and things like that. But the only thing that that kind of struck me this week in regard to news was if my browser will work, if Chrome will bring me the goodies. Was things like the brand new full Google Play Music app being on the way, which again kind of small for Chrome OS, and then the other one was Hangouts, which I think is like phenomenal. So I know Craig, you've got an even bigger story than just some UI changes to 2 other major apps. So I kind of want let's lead off with the fun stuff, honestly, and that's going to be the Chrome app Hangouts. I'm going to share my screen. Wait, can I share my screen? Hold, please. 1 second. I just got to do some cleanup before I go share my screen. Boop. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly because my audio is going to get for junk. But you'll be able to see the Chrome, the new Hangouts app. So give me 1 second, and we'll share my screen. And we're going to do the entire screen so you can see my desktop. Heyo! So my screen right now is being shared, and you can actually see over on the side here, there's actually a Chrome, it's a Chrome app called Hangouts, and it actually allows it to be a floating little tool set, and that shows your active current windows that you want to be reading. And then it also, when you click it, it actually gives you the full list of all of your awesome Hangouts that you have listed. So, guys, I'm a huge fan. I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm a huge fan of this application. Craig, you and I talked about the fact that the days of Pigeon, for people that are familiar with Pigeon or Trillian or the old AIM, and Yahoo Messenger, although some of them have skinned themselves into oblivion, they're no longer in a window. But Pigeon especially, I hearken to the days of actually things being in a window instead of being this awesome little floating kind of widget. Guys, you've tried the new Hangouts app, which again is available as a Chrome app, so it's available pretty much for every device you got. What are your thoughts, Craig? I'll start with you. Just give me the rundown on your thoughts.
I'm not used to it yet. That's my problem right now. I find it to be an interesting concept. It's the chat heads idea. So they, like you mentioned, they're floating. Each conversation is its own little bubble. It's going to take some getting used to. I found my placement on my screen where I've stacked my bubbles, but I'm running into some strange issues. I found that there's a limit on the number of bubbles that it will show depending on what device you're using. For my Chromebook, it's 6. I can't have more than 6 conversation bubbles on my screen, and that's a problem for me. Not that I'm super popular, but just it's a problem for me.
Oh, you're popular. So, it's okay. You can admit it. You can be like, look, I got Hangouts spanning the globe.
Sure. So that's my biggest complaint at the moment. I've also noticed some performance issues. Just switching between bubbles takes a fraction of a second longer than I would like it to. I did go ahead and uninstall the old extension just to dive in head first, and I'm getting used to it. But there are some people that are firmly going to stick around to the old extension and not move forward with this new one. And I can understand why. It's just different. It's different, John. It's different, and a lot of people don't like different. It also didn't install over the old one, which confuses a lot of people. Although I have been told that the old extension will start to show a upgrade prompt soon, the next couple weeks. So I don't know how exactly that process will work. Whether it'll be, hey, go to the store and install this, and then it'll automatically uninstall the old one. I don't know how that process is going to look, but there will be some sort of process there to guide users along. So I'll be interested in seeing what that flow is like, but for now I've committed to being patient with the new one while I get used to it.
All right. Mr. Welbus, I know that you are you're like me probably. You don't have too many Hangout windows.
Nothing like you, John.
Mr. Tumbleson is a world renowned in the annals of the internet. So he has more chat windows than we could probably shake a stick at. But what are your thoughts on the? Have you seen the same thing? Do you have like more than 6? Have you had the opportunity to kind of kick the tires?
My max is usually about 4 at a time. So I haven't had that issue. The thing that annoy me, and maybe I don't know if this is just me, I can't move the bubble to the top 2/3 of my screen. It is imprisoned in the bottom third of my screen, which is super annoying. And I can't bring it down to sit on top of my taskbar. So it's always, by default, in my way in some capacity, which is slightly annoying. It was also annoying that by default, when you install the app, it gives a little, and by little I mean large, preview of every message that you get next to your chat bubble. So that's luckily an easy setting change. I can go in and turn that off, so every time someone sends me a message, I'm not getting a pop-up on my screen. So that was a little bit of annoying, but easily fixed. I don't know, it's okay, I guess, but there's just no good spot to put it on my screen. Because I'll move it to the left side of my screen, and I'll go do something else. I'll get on Cloud 9, and that's where all my folders are. So, okay, now I got to move my Hangouts over to the right side of the screen and do something else, and now it's in the way on that. And just about right in the middle of my screen is the only place it's not in the way, but then it's right on top of whatever I'm trying to look at. So I'm not sure if I'm going to use this long term or if I'm going to use the Hangouts extension for as long as that still exists. I'm forcing myself to use the app right now just to get used to it and see if I can like it. I'm not sure why they don't let me move it to the top part of my screen. It's weird.
I'm actually noticing the same thing on the Chromebook. I hadn't tried moving it to the top on the Chromebook, so I've just now tried, and I'm forced to use the lower half of the. And that might be the 6 restriction, because it looks like that would only fit about 6.
That is correct. That has been my experience. It purposely limits you so that you don't cut yourself off.
Right, and now James, I do see that if you click the button you're looking for is going to be on the new Hangout. There's actually a little triangle pointing down. If you click that, it'll actually give you the option section, and there is a not always on top. So you would uncheck the box for always on top, and then now when you go to Cloud 9, it would not be on top all the time. So you could turn it off. You can make it a background app, so to speak.
Yeah, but then it's not really usable at that point. I mean, I have to shrink everything down on my screen just to see my Hangouts. I feel like it was much more convenient when it was down in my system tool.
Agreed.
Or whatever you call that thing down there.
Well, you can also click the Hangouts icon in the system tray, and it'll bring it down and not have it sitting out in the open anymore. Like, it minimizes it, so to speak.
That's true.
Well, anyway, I enjoy it. I think those are really valid points about how it works, and I agree. And Craig, I know that, again, you have a lot of friends. I don't, so you might have more than 6 chat windows open at a time. I'm a lonely fellow, and especially when it comes to the interwebs. So, you know what though? I would definitely, and I know you're already doing this, but I would report that as soon as possible, because I think it's one of those use cases where if you're using it a lot and you're noticing a slowdown or something like that, that's probably going to be something they're going to want to know about. And then maybe they already know about it or not, but it's something you're going to want to report, so they know what.
Definitely. And another part of my problem is that I use Google Voice, so all of my texting is now in these bubbles too. So it's not just Hangout conversations, it's texting and Hangouts combined with a limit of 6 at a time. And that's the threshold I'm hitting.
Well, that's some BS, honestly. I don't like that at all. If you did texting and that inside of the app, I would be pissed.
If they ever integrate texting through Hangouts with my carrier, I'll probably have the same problem as Craig then. Running text and Hangouts on this app would be quite annoying, I think.
Yeah. To be honest, James, I'm the same way with you. I think I'm missing something like Craig. I got the I have a Google Voice phone number, but I don't send. So I use it for voicemail. That's all I use it for. Basically, my voicemail is forwarded to that phone number. That's all I ever use it for. But I don't know how to integrate texting into my Google Voice account, because that would be friggin' awesome.
You can't with your existing carrier number. Basically, the situation I was in a few years ago was I was switching from Verizon to T-Mobile, and I wanted to do it while keeping a consistent number without paying all the porting fees and all that nonsense. So I switched to Google Voice. I did the painful part before I even left Verizon. Gave everyone my Google Voice number and switched to using that as my primary. Then when I went to T-Mobile, I just didn't give anybody my actual carrier number. So people only have my Google Voice number, which means that all of my texting goes straight into Hangouts now. It's all dumped into the same. And I have everything, all of my online communications, except email and things like that, all in one app. And that's very handy, but as we've seen, there's some speed bumps along the way.
Right.
But yeah, I don't have the carrier integration because my carrier number just doesn't ever get used.
It's also not possible yet. Not on Chromebook. They integrated carrier texting into the Android Hangouts app, but they haven't integrated it onto the Chrome Hangouts app. So I can't text from my Verizon number with my Chrome Hangouts app, but I can text from my Verizon number with the Android Hangouts app. If they do give us that integration, then I will run into the same issue as Craig with having all my texts and Hangouts in the Hangouts app.
Now, James, doesn't Pushbullet allow for texting through?
Yes, but it's pretty terrible. What'll happen is you'll get a pop-up and it'll say, you got a text from this person. Click here to reply. You click there, you type in your reply, you hit send, the window goes away. So you can't use it to send another message. You sit there and wait until they reply back before you can send them another message via Pushbullet. Right now, apps like Mighty Text are a lot better for text messaging because you can Mighty Text integrates with Gmail, so you can open up Gmail, and on the left side where it says inbox, it also says text, so you can click on text, and it'll pull up it syncs with your phone, all your text messages, and you can pull up a chat thread, and you can just text away from your computer. That way you don't have to sit there and wait for them to reply so that you get a notification and then reply to that. You can just sit there and text it as you would on your phone. So I don't use Pushbullet to reply to text messages. I still use Mighty Text for that. And once I get my Moto X, I'll use whatever they call their little Moto service.
I was just going to ask you guys, because I know, Craig, you get the Mix, and I know, James, you want to get it. Craig, do you use the I think it's called Motorola Mobility or something? Or
Yeah, that sounds familiar, Moto Mobility. I used it for a week when I tried out the Moto X, and I would say it was on par with Mighty Text, probably a little better. Mighty Text doesn't sync all my stuff correctly. I think Moto did it a little better.
I had problems with the service recognizing my phone. It would be Mobility doesn't recognize your phone all of a sudden, and then some text would go through, and then it worked. I would say 95% of the time, but that 5% really sucked. Right? So.
Yeah. It doesn't sync all my contacts. I'll see the thread from my boss, but it just shows his phone number in Mighty Text. It doesn't show his name. Or on my phone, it shows his name, so I know who I'm talking with. And when I go into Mighty Text, if I want to send just out of the blue send him a text message, I don't know his phone number by heart. I have to look at the conversations and see which one. Okay, this is my boss. Let me send him a text real quick. I don't know why. It seems like that would be the easiest part of the whole syncing thing, is matching numbers to names when it syncs my contacts. But for some contacts, it just doesn't sync them. I don't know if it's maybe has something to do with. I know every time you add a number to your phone, it asks you if you want to add it to your phone contacts or your Google contacts, and maybe Mighty Text only syncs with one or the other, and maybe I accidentally added him as the other one. Maybe that has something to do with it, because most of my contacts it syncs the name and number just fine, but a few of them it doesn't. But it's still better than Pushbullet.
Right. Craig, what about you? You've already got everyone texting you on the Google Voice, so you don't need that anymore, do you? You wouldn't even use the Mobility one.
Correct, because I don't get any messages sent to the carrier number for the phone to pass along to do that integration. It all just gets dumped from Google Voice.
Lucky man. All right. Well, so that's all about the Hangouts, and which I think is cool, and it's a good thing. Next up is wait for it, getting there. I knew there was something else that I pinged. Is that something I wanted to? Was it the brand new full Google Play Music app for Chrome OS? I think it was. And this was just basically with me scanning OMG Chrome, which is an awesome website, and I went over there and I was taking a look at some of the great articles that Joey's come up with lately about giving you insightful tips on apps that are available, things like that. And one of the ones he had was a future forward and a kind of the future forward thing is that basically they're going to come up with an app that is more polished so that when you play music releases for their on a full Chrome app, instead of being, which by the way, we've talked about this. I'm not a Google, what do they call, All Access Pass or whatever it's called. I'm not a member. I don't have a jacket. But I really do enjoy. I've had, for the limited music experience that I have, right? So I don't need a full featured music app because I'm not that guy. But even the web version and like pumping it over to the TV for the girls to listen to music is awesome. So I'm excited to see a dedicated app, but I honestly think they did a great job with the web version. James, I know that you're a big music guy, right? You use the whole All Access. You get the stuff.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to get in early when they were giving it away for $7.99 a month. So I got grandfathered into that. But yeah, I do use it. I use it a lot. I'm not really sure what the benefits will be of this new app. If it's going to maybe work a little better or faster, I'm not really sure. Like you, I'm also fairly impressed with the web app, which I think it's actually a packaged app now, right? The Google Music. That was one of the apps that they packaged. Because for a while I had two icons in my apps tray. One had a little shortcut arrow next to it, and the other didn't.
Right. I think it is. It's packaged, but it isn't. Well, the one I have is a link. I don't know about you. I'll have to double check. But go ahead.
But yeah, so I'm not really sure. I've heard people talking about it, and I'm just not really sure what the benefits will be. So it's hard to be excited about it when the current app already does everything that I would want it to do. Particularly now that I can upload music, which I'm finding out that was something that a lot of people got hyped up about. I have a feeling very few people use that because maybe this is just me, I can't really think of a scenario where I would have random MP3s on my Chromebook that I need to upload to Google Music, unless if I bought MP3s from somewhere other than Google Music for some reason, like Amazon, and then I upload them to Google. I don't know why I wouldn't just buy them from Google, but maybe it's not available on Google. I don't know. There's no disk drive, so I can't burn a CD on my Chromebook, but it's there. It's a feature that we can use. So I don't know. The app already does everything I would want it to do. I can upload music, listen to music, download music, buy music, cast it to my Chromecast. So yeah, I don't know.
And yeah, see, that's weird. So
and I do have two apps. I just verified. There's no arrow next to either one of them, but I have two Play Music apps in my app store here.
Correct, and I don't have the ability to right now to share my screen with this guy. But basically, what you have, if you've ever used the Bubbles app, this is kind of what the other music app is. You have to have actually opened a browser and gone to play.google.com/music, and then be launching. So then that way you can run this little itty bitty app. It's kind of like it's just you can see the album art. See if I play my thing here. So right now, I'm playing a song and I can see the album art, all that good stuff. And it's just a small little app where I can actually thumbs up, thumb down, play, pause, go to the next one, all that good stuff. So instead of it being like a full-blown web page, it's now just this small, tight little...
I'm seeing that too. You think they could have come up with a slightly different name and icon instead of having two icons that look exactly the same, both called Play Music. One opens a small mini player, and the other takes you to play the music.google.com.
Correct. Like when you open the little app. Craig, what is your experience with the Google Music and especially on Chrome OS?
Well, my experience has been confused, like James is pointing out. It's very clear, and we'll discuss this in a little bit, that there's some internal miscommunication. And as Chrome OS users, we are the ugly stepchildren at Google right now. And we see evidence of this everywhere, from compatibility with Play Music and ARM Chromebooks to having duplicate Google Play Music app listings in the Chrome Web Store. There's a lot of things that could and should be better that aren't. Specifically for this new app, the primary features are going to be it'll be a native app, so it'll be faster than the web interface. It'll probably allow offline storage of music, which people have been asking for a long time. Caching, pinning, whatever you want to call it. Other than that, it probably won't offer much else other than, it'll be another step in the right direction. It'll be another app that is a full app for Chrome OS, and it's hard to be disappointed about that. Especially
as long as I don't have 3 icons now.
You shouldn't. This should install over top of the current mini player. When the mini player was released, there were a few developers that hinted that it was just a temporary placeholder. So hopefully it'll seamlessly update over top of that. That would be my hope. But we'll see, James. We'll see. Why not 3? Why not 4?
Do you think it'll be the default music player? Because right now it's just, if I open an MP3 that I have in my Files app, it opens this little very basic Chrome OS media player thing.
That's a good question. I would actually prefer it not be the default. Because a lot of times when I'm sampling like little audio clips, like today is actually a good example because I sent a bug report to the Hangouts community, the product forum, about a buzzing noise that my Nexus 4 makes when you've got headphones in, and I included a 15-second clip. That's not something that I would want associated with my Google Play Music account. I certainly wouldn't want that to be automatically uploaded and accounted against my 20,000 song limit.
No, I wouldn't want it to go there either, but I wouldn't mind if like that little mini music player we have now was my default music player. Wouldn't have to upload anything to my account, but just to, and it doesn't really make a difference, but I just like, I'm the kind of, I should probably be an Apple user. I just like things to look the same. If I'm going to open music, I would like it to just be Google Music, the same app every time, instead of sometimes Google Music, sometimes this basic little Chrome OS player. But in the end, it doesn't really matter as long as when I double-click on MP3, I hear music come out of my speakers. I guess that's all that really matters.
Yeah, I will say we've seen what happens when like Microsoft decides to set their media player as the default. You end up with this bloated application that keeps adding features and takes forever to start. So when you click a music file, you don't get audio right away because the app has to start. Yeah. So to some extent, I think a small, lightweight player as the default might be a better option, but you can always select with the little drop down from the Files app which app you want to use to open it. So it would be an extra step once until you set the Google Play Music as your default, and then you'd be fine.
Can I do that now? I didn't even think to try that.
I doubt it.
On your Android device, you can set it as a default player. I know that.
Well, yeah.
We're not talking about Android, John.
It is by default already, I think. If you install Google Music, I think it becomes a default.
Although I will say, in Android news, AT&T just leaked that they will be selling the Nexus 6 tomorrow for $50 on contract.
$50 for Nexus 6?
On contract.
Do we even know who's building that thing?
Motorola.
Oh, so it is Motorola? Yeah. I have not been following that because I can't upgrade till May, so I don't want to get excited about phones when I have to wait till freaking May to get one. Of course, my wife is going to upgrade in January, so maybe I should. I was thinking about getting her the Moto X, but if I can get a Nexus 6 for $50, I might get her that.
Wow.
Is it 11 inches, or how big is this thing?
It's 6
inches.
6. It basically looks like the Moto X, but it's been enlarged.
So it's the new Moto X?
Is it a phablet?
Yeah, that's the intention. It's supposed to be a larger phone for for people that want the larger device.
Fat people, seriously.
I don't know if she'll want that because she's using a smallish phone, a Resound, HTC Resound. Of course, she has a fat case on it, so it's like duct taping 2 iPhones together.
Well, anyway, that happened while we were recording. Hot off the press for people that are going to listen to this time shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, by the time John gets this up, we'll have the Nexus 7 available.
Exactly.
We already do. Right. I have one.
Oh, shoot, that's right. That's already a thing.
The Nexus 8 is the one we're missing, because the Nexus 9 is going to be tomorrow, too. Oh, right. Did I spill beans on that? I think that's common knowledge.
Don't forget to install Chrome on your new Nexus devices.
Well, don't talk about that. That's secret, too.
No, but wait a minute. Now
Chrome on Nexus devices is a secret?
Chrome OS on Nexus devices is.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. Careful now.
That would just be silly.
It would be silly. I keep arguing against it. Those crazy developers.
See right now while we're talking, I am chilling on the Google Music, and I am checking out the listen to that. It's just a sample.
I don't hear anything.
Hold on. How about now?
Nope.
Ah, that's tragic. That's one of the things I like about Google Music is the when you want to do a sample, you can actually listen to pretty much the entire album and get an idea of what you're getting.
Hey, it's a month, and you really can listen to the whole album anytime you want.
I know, but I'm not doing that.
Do you buy CDs, John?
No, I don't.
You steal music. Just keep stealing music.
Whoa, hey, whoa. First of all, I haven't stolen music since I was like 22, and Napster was still a thing. Thank you very much.
You mean Kazaa?
No, Napster.
You're a little older than me, I guess. When I started stealing music, Napster was already in jail.
Exactly. So, I was fidgeting with Pirate Bay before Pirate Bay was Pirate Bay. That's not true. We weren't warranting anything. We were using an application. But anyway, I wonder if it was using the torrent protocol. I don't think it was. Was it? That's
digress, John. Digress.
That's a Napster ancient question. Anyway, where was I? So music, guys. I've talked about this. I literally have. Do you remember when Columbia House and them would do like, send us a penny and you can have these 20 CDs and then just buy one CD within the next 365 days.
I bought a lot of CDs from those kind of things. They were actually legit. Like, you could get tons of CDs for cheap that way. It sounded too good to be true, but it worked.
I do not know what CDs are.
Okay. I'm with you.
It's a way to save money at the bank, Craig. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I can remember buying like Metallica's Black Album on cassette, like the singles on a cassette tape, like in like a Sam Goody and an FYE or FYE.
Yes, Sam Goody.
Yeah, man. Anyway, the point is, one of the first albums that I ever had was I received a tape deck for like my 4th or 5th birthday. It was an Alarm Clock Radio / tape deck, and my sister bought me for Christmas Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. So, suck on that when it comes to old school. I don't have a lot of music, so James's point about the MP3s being on my Chromebook might actually be more kind of poignant for me, but I like the fact that I can, and again, I'm sure you can do this on iTunes and all the others, but I just like Google Music for that fact that I can, you can literally say play all to an album and listen to like, they only have like a minute for each song, but it's enough to really get kind of like an understanding of the album. But I'm not trying to play up Google Play Music. That's what my experience within the last actually couple days, just looking at like some albums that I thought about purchasing. Anyway, so that wraps up, I think, the news in regard to this episode. And I'm going to make Craig's extension the main.
Please.
I didn't look. You're the one that went there, not me. So Craig, I think this is actually one of the reasons I use the extension is the I've actually got on my my screen right now a Wikipedia page for Extension 3 because I wanted to refresh myself on the file system. Craig, I'm going to actually throw it to you to do a kind of description of what happened. There's a little bit of I'm just going to turn it over to you because it deals with a certain community, which we've talked about multiple times on this show, because and also the fact that the Chrome OS is actually built around kind of this community. So I'm gonna throw it to you in regard to the file system extension, the file system issue. Extension is just one of them. You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. Take it away, Craig.
All right. For anyone out there that is still a high school student that is looking forward to graduating from high school to escape the drama, I've got news for you. It doesn't end. This past weekend, we had an exercise in online drama. And online drama happens all the time for all kinds of reasons. But this week it hit home. It was the Chrome OS community. The Chrome OS, specifically the Chrome OS developers, were under fire from the open source community. And the details are pretty technical, so we're going to just give you a gist, because I know James is already asleep. So the gist of the concept is essentially that there are different ways to store data on removable storage devices. So what we're talking about is SD cards, flash drives, and removable hard drives.
Craig, if I can jump in for 1 second. I don't want to belittle file systems and say that they're just for the external stuff. When you talk about file systems, it's actually a major thing, right? It's what's also used on your hard drive, but I know that that's not where we're going today. But I just want to let people know who don't know, who aren't, super into the whole geekiness of it.
Yeah, Craig.
Come
on, everybody knows that.
We're here to educate, right? Or something like that.
That's not what I'm here for.
I know.
I'm here to be educated, John.
And Craig, I don't mean to interrupt. I don't. But I just want to let the people know that when it comes to file systems, that it's not just the removable stuff. Go ahead.
I apologize to listeners for trying to keep it light. John will make sure it doesn't happen again. So again, the gist of what we're talking about today surrounds removable storage and how you store data on them. Now, if you buy an SD card or a flash drive off the shelf at Walmart, it's going to be formatted as something called FAT. Likewise, if you buy a removable or a portable hard drive off the shelf at Walmart, it's probably going to be formatted as NTFS. Neither of those names mean anything to the average person. But what you should know is that they're both Microsoft-controlled formats. They're also the best for compatibility at the moment because Microsoft's platforms are the most popular. That's the sad reality. Now, as with everything else that Microsoft does, the open source community has made a point to offer an open alternative to their formats. And in this case, there's a lot of them. But tonight we're only going to talk about one specific family, which is called the Extended File System family. Dates back to 1992, and it's currently one of the more popular ones across all the various Linux distributions, everything from Ubuntu into Android and even Chrome OS. John, do you want to jump in? I saw your mouth open.
He was just in awe of your overwhelming knowledge.
No, actually, Craig, I think that there's been iterations up from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 4 now. Is a successor of Extended File System, which is a journal file system, which if you really want to dig into it, check out the show notes. I'm going to have a link to the Wikipedia page that goes over file systems. It's not sexy, but honestly, your operating system needs it. At everything that it does, it's using the file system. Every single thing it does. So if you really want, you're really into the nerd stuff, check out the show notes. Go ahead, Craig.
Sure. So again, the gist is that you don't need to know the details that there are different versions in the Extended File System family. You just need to know that there's a category, there's a type of file system called EXT, and it's the open version compared to Microsoft's alternatives. So, Chrome OS uses the open source alternative for the guts of Chrome OS. And that's cool. And up until recently, Chrome OS could also read and write to removable storage devices that shared that same format. So again, you plug in a flash drive that uses the open source version, it works. Plug in a flash drive that uses Microsoft version, it works too. That's the best strategy overall, max compatibility. Well, about a year ago, the Chrome OS team looked at their upcoming roadmap for features, they looked at things like usage stats, and they decided that they were no longer going to support the open source version for removable storage devices. That decision was reached a year ago, and they've started to implement it starting a few weeks ago. And as of this weekend, it went live. And it also happened that this weekend, yes, John, it actually is live on the stable channel, so these don't currently work. But also this weekend, people took notice. The open source community suddenly realized that the devices they formatted using the open standard were not going to be read by Chrome OS.
Craig, and forgive me for asking you this question because I know that you're not the developer that made the decision or anything like that. But if you know, can you tell me what the benefit for them was to remove extended file systems from the Files app?
Sure. The team actually was very forthcoming with this information because a few members of the Chromium team pushed back on it because they used it for their personal removable storage devices. So the final answer basically came down to a couple things. The very first problem is that the team wanted to implement the ability to rename your removable storage devices, and there wasn't support for that with the current implementation. So in other words, users would be able to rename the Microsoft formatted devices, but not the open source formatted devices, and that they were afraid that would create user experience confusion with some people being able to use the feature and some people not being able to use the feature. That's been criticized. We'll get to that in a second. The other issues were security. Because it was using the original implementation on Chrome OS, and the Chrome OS in general is getting away from that type of implementation, there was a small risk that it could be attacked because it wasn't currently being maintained. And then the third issue is just ongoing maintenance cost money. It cost money, it cost developer time, you have to test against it, and basically they were using a kind of hacky workaround way to get it to work, and there's better ways to do it. So they were looking to basically save themselves some work moving forward by just getting rid of it. And with the small usage number, very few people are actively using this. That should be noted. Compared to the millions of Chrome OS users, a very small percentage are using it because a very small percentage even know what it is. So they took all of that into consideration and they just decided that they were just going to drop it and move forward. Now, understandably, that very small number of users were upset. And as upset users usually do, they took to the internet. They took to the internet, John. They went to Reddit, of all places. Specifically, they went to the open source communities on Reddit, such as Linux, the Linux subreddit. And in the open source community, there isn't a strict obligation, but there's kind of an implied obligation where if you're going to use open source technology, you should do some part to give back to the community overall. And Google has a good track history of doing that. They make a lot of donations, they upstream a lot of their development work, and they do bug bounties for open source projects even, where if you find a bug in an open source project, Google will even pay you for that, even though they have no obligation to.
But in the open source community, they're also seen as another big company as well.
Right. So when you tell the open source community that a big corporation has taken some of the efforts, the fruits of the community, and now they're going to stop catering to savvy users, which make up a large part of the development community for open source projects, it's kind of turning your back on those users. That's the impression the users got. And even people that don't use Chrome OS but are still active in those communities were visibly upset. And I say visibly because they were quite forward with their opinions. You can head to the tracker and read about 100 of them. Some of them are nice. Not very many of them are nice, actually. Many of them are mean and insulting to the developers. And it doesn't paint a good portrait of what the open source community should be. But that's that's a 6-hour debate on a different podcast. So we'll leave that for another time.
Google's made the misstep of also not releasing a Google Drive app for Linux as well. There's been a couple of missteps in the open source community, especially with Linux when Chrome OS is built on Linux, that you have to, for me, to hear that the open source community is pissed off at Google is like, yeah, that's going to happen, right? Because and honestly, and I love Linux, but the user base is pretty darn small in comparison to the other user base. And at this point, even when it comes to desktop Linux, Chrome OS is the top selling, what is it? What do they call it? It's a rough night. If you go to something like DistroWatch, right? They try and extrapolate, who's downloading what when, and so Ubuntu's number 1, and Mint's number 2, and then you've got other ones that all down the line, Debian, base. But you've got something like Chrome OS, which is really based on Linux, is like literally the second fastest growing Linux distribution next to Android. So here you have a Linux distribution going out to the masses, and everyone's using it, but yet the users of Linux who have been there for 20 to 30 years or whatever are like, man, come on! Like, no one can cater, and no one can, even Google, who's using. So I can see where their ire lies, but I can also see where, like, Google's like, look, I need to build this, and I have, like Craig, you mentioned the maintainability. There's money that needs to go out the door to take care of all this stuff, and right now, there's only 0.002% of you that are using extension, the extended file system for media. So I could totally see where Google's coming from, and I can also see where the Linux community is coming from.
The story's not over yet, John.
Oh dear. Oh,
it has an ending. I won't quantify what type of ending. It's up to interpretation. Essentially, throughout the course of the weekend, there was enough outcry from the developer community that the Chromium team reconsidered their stance, and they are now looking into compromises. The current strategy seems to be that there is an upcoming API that will make re-implementing the feature in a secure way a possibility. Now, they haven't commented saying that this is what they're going to do, but this is the best approach they have so far. There is a ticket open. They've opened a new ticket to track progress on that. So they're pursuing that avenue. But as always, when you're in a development stage, you never promise anything. You can't make promises because things happen. But that's the current approach, and they have said that if that ends up being the way they go, they will make sure to re-implement the feature as it stood while the development for the new feature is ongoing, and then once the new feature reaches stability, they would then go ahead and depreciate the old implementation, so that the users of the feature should never be without the feature. No matter how it's implemented on the back end, the user should never see the feature disappear. And I think that is probably how it should have been to begin with, but as we're about to get into, Google has a lot of problems when it comes to communication with both user and developer, prioritizing developers against the mass market consumer base, and even some internal communication occasionally doesn't work. And I think some of that is the 6-week release cycle. We love it because we can keep up with it, but it just puts kind of unnecessary pressure when it comes to trying to get features out the door and making split-second decisions without a lot of thought to the repercussions that are going to happen to the 50-year-old user that isn't savvy with computers, that just needs to use Hangouts to talk to their grandchildren via video and check a few emails and some low-level usage. So I think there's work to be done here, and I think there's some things we can learn from this situation, and I'm glad the ending satisfies most of the users that were complaining, but I'm not necessarily thrilled with how the users handled it either. There was a lot of unnecessary hostility there, and I don't think it was a good representation of what the open source community strives for. That's just my opinion, though.
I'm with you. And you know, if I could jump on a soapbox for a second, I would say that the Linux community, and you mentioned like developers and things like that. So the Linux community is a very full-bodied community of people that A, either care, or B, are developers, so that they need that stack itself. So they you know, but they're very passionate people. But when it comes to developers, if you look at someone like Dell, who has released iterations of a Linux box multiple times trying to hit developers, the big companies are not necessarily going to cater to them because they're so small. Like, I don't understand how developers can be like, well, you know, how can you not release this or that? Well, if I'm only going to sell 500 units, and then another one I'm going to sell 100,000 units, that's a huge leap. And so to get mad at a company, whether it be Google or whether it be Dell or Gateway or, you know, whatever other company, you know, you can't be you. And the whole thing about, you know, Craig, about the fact that people, you know, say, you know, some nasty things. That's the internet. I mean, that's going to happen. But from the standpoint of trying to understand why a company would try and do something like that, or would remove something that only works with 0.001% of the base, whatever it is. I'm sure it's a full percentage, maybe. It just really reminds me of some of the things that I do, like at my job, where I try and think future forward, or I try and bring a Chromebook to work, or I do something like that. You know, my company is working with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I mean, we have a service desk that, you know, takes all the calls, and there's like, you know, there's dozens and dozens of people. I work in the IT department, so I can feel kind of entitled to be like, no, I'd like to do this. But when it comes to the actual cost to do that, just for me to say that I'd like to do that, you know, I've got to push that wall forward. I can't just break through the wall and be like, do this for me, and then the company spend a lot of money to get me to be able to do that. It's trying to push that barrier forward. Right now, the Linux community, even today, I think there's a massive adoption. You know, especially with governments taking on, education sector taking it on, with Chrome OS becoming more and more popular. But Chrome OS isn't necessarily Linux at that point. Chrome OS is something different. Chrome OS is Linux, but with this web layer on top. My point is, to get off my soapbox and let Craig continue, is that I don't appreciate the fact that, yes, the Linux community has, of course, contributed tons and tons and tons, but I think that Google has done their best to create a product that they wanted to release to the public, right? Even Ubuntu is something that's kind of hard for some people to grasp coming off of Windows. Here's a company that's trying to release these products, and they're not necessarily making a huge profit on this at all, and they're just trying to get this out there. Then to be upset about something like that, I think it annoys me when I hear that people are like, you know, dumbfounded by how, you know, Google could do something like this or that, or they could, you know, the developers, and they're actually developers, make the decision that, you know, it's something that we can support. It's just going to take too many man hours that, you know, we can't do it. So anyway, Craig, I'm sorry. Go ahead. That was my soapbox. If everybody's still awake.
Well, I actually disagree with your premise, because I'm looking at it from a different context. I completely understand where you're coming from in terms of complaint about a feature when you're in the minority. But I do think there's something to be said about weighted minority priority. When it comes to the developers, Chrome OS is still a relatively immature ecosystem in terms of available apps. So it makes sense to kind of court the developer interest at the moment. And if that means a little extra man hours here, a little extra woman hours here, to make that happen, I think it's an investment well spent. And Google does not have a history of communicating well with developers. They just don't. It's not something they do well.
Microsoft doesn't either, though. Either does Apple. They all introduce something because they're a big blob, and they'll introduce something that their core group of developers thinks is a good idea, but the developers en masse don't think is a good idea. that make sense?
Right.
Because they've all done it. All of them. IBM's done it. Microsoft's done it. Apple's done it even recently. So has Microsoft done it recently because they're trying to shift with the market. So then they throw things to their developers that are like, what the?
Sure, and I'm not saying Google's any worse. I'm just saying Google should be a lot better. Because it is something that you do have to take into consideration, especially when Google doesn't have the app ecosystem weight that Windows does. Windows gets to bully Adobe into do this with Photoshop, do that with Photoshop, and Google has to plead. So there is a difference there, and it's something that I think Google should be focused on. I think it's building the experience. Consumer interest is good, but you still have to court the developers, because if you don't, then there's nothing for the consumers to use. And the other point, it's got to come back to me. The other point, the biggest thing that angers me, my anger placement, is surrounding the comments. And you said it's the internet, what are you going to do? It's not the internet, John. It's a development tracker. And the people making the comments are part of the open source community, and they're arguing over a development choice. So if you're going to go to a development tracker as someone who's arguing a point related to development, you should understand the context, or else you wouldn't be there in the first place. And to go onto a development tracker representing a developer interest and just throwing out spam, essentially, you're not adding to the technical discussion, you're insulting the developers, especially their intelligence. There were a few that say, you'd have to be a moron to remove this feature, what are you on? And then a few other people were just like, Google's got money, just throw money at the problem. If you're going to represent the open source community, don't do it in a negative light. Just because it's the internet is not an excuse when it comes to this type of context. We're not talking about YouTube comments, John. We're talking about comments made by developers on a development tracker. And that's what angers me.
Look, I'm right there with you. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and of course, throwing slang, slurs, whatever you know, hitting a developer, hitting even the company in a personal manner, right? In that type of environment is unprofessional, and also paints you in a bad light. So don't ever do it. That's my credo. That's what I tell everyone not to do. And I totally agree with you. There's definitely better ways, and I think that the hue and cry that the developers saw, I'm sure that they're the type to throw off the crap, right? To throw off the YouTube type comments, whether or not they know the developer or not. They know to throw that off and say, where's the meat of this issue?
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there, John, because you interrupted me earlier. There is a difference between being catcalled on a sidewalk and having someone come into your office and yell at you. And that's kind of what happened here, because these aren't comments just being left on Reddit where the developers can ignore them. These are comments made directly to the developers in their work environment. So you've got basically an office door that's open, and you've got members of the public walking in and berating you for development decisions. And I think that is the differentiating factor here. And I agree it's completely unprofessional, but I expect more from the open source community because I respect their intelligence, and they aren't respecting their intelligence by making those types of comments.
Well, they're smart, and then there's having common sense. And it sounds like those are some people that don't have any common sense. So when I make a decision, you know, at my job or at, you know, like my daughter's school or whatever, there's been times when people have had an opinion that's very strong, right? I would hope that the developers would have a tough enough skin to be able to see through that, and I think that they made the decisions that you're talking about where they backtracked, they pulled off, not because of the people that were lobbing really terrible comments through their office door, right? To make your point that it's literally their work environment, right? Which makes it a hostile work environment, which makes it uncomfortable, you know, all day until this issue ends. I would hope that they made the decision though, and I think that you're kind of pointing out that they made the decision to allow it and let it roll through and then wait for the API to come through. I bet that they made that decision through looking at the positive feedback, which was not necessarily positive. It was a disagreement, but in a more of a debate manner than a let me scream at you from the street and throw tomatoes at you type comment. Wouldn't you say that was more like where they were going? Because I mean, their response was to that effect.
Yeah, I think this was probably the result we've come to was probably in the cards all along, but it just annoys me. It's not just creating a hostile work environment, but the people creating the hostile work environment are the type of people that would suffer in the same exact context because they're developers too. They should know better. That's what gets me. They're developers. They know that by doing that, they're creating a hostile work environment, and they would not appreciate it. It's doing unto others as you would have others do to you. And that's what it drives me crazy. I don't know why.
No. I totally see your point. What you're saying is that a developer who, no matter what language you're working in, no matter what platform you're working on, no matter what you're doing, you know that it takes a certain amount of time to perform a task or to get something done, and they're screaming things like, "We'll just have Google throw more money at you," or whatever, right? And that is it. Those are, especially coming from developers, those are going to be ignorant comments, especially a developer that's worked in a team scenario. If you've ever worked team scenario with developers, it's just like working with any other team. You have to make sure that everyone has a task, everybody gets that task done, and that everything ends on time, or you have to link the people together to get something done. And if you've got something that you feel can't get done, it's not a money issue. You're not going to add 4 people onto your team every couple of months, and then you can't. That's not how it works. And with open source, it's even more difficult. So to have a developer from the open source community say that, I think, Craig, is an even bigger point to say, if you've never worked with a team and understood that there's some things that you must let go, right, then, I mean, that's a good point, Craig. I mean, what you're saying is that, they're not even sticking true to understand. They're not trying at all to live in that person's shoes at all. Instead, they're just throwing, terrible comments at them left and right, which is totally valid. It's totally understandable that you're angry about it.
And it's not just the comments, because what a lot of people don't realize is developers typically like to be behind the scenes. And I guess most people think that anyway, but that is the truth. A lot of developers are not PR people. And so they feel uncomfortable when they're kind of shoved into a PR position, which is what this ended up being. The developers were basically trying to justify to this mass of hostile users their decision. And then to backtrack on that and to basically just feed the fire, it puts them in an uncomfortable position. And the commenters that were saying the negative things would not appreciate being in that same position. So they understand that they were making it awkward. They do, and they did it anyway. And that, to me, is not a good representation of the open source community. I expect better. I've seen better. Better is the normal. It is normally better. This was just a very kind of disgraceful moment, in my opinion. On behalf... Go ahead, James.
Obviously, I have no idea when it comes to the technical aspect of this argument, but I do know something about telling people that they suck at what they do, and a lot of companies just don't take credit for it, and sometimes, and I have no experience with Google, so I don't know if this justifies anything they've done, but I know sometimes you do kind of have to be an ass to get someone to listen to you. Sometimes going into a forum and saying, hey, excuse me, I think this is a bad idea, maybe you should reconsider. A lot of times that's not going to do anything. I'm not saying you should go on and call Google douchebags like some of these Reddit people, or not Reddit, but some of the people were doing in that code tracker, but I can kind of see where sometimes maybe not being super nice and happy about it is sometimes needed just to be heard. not saying that that's necessary here. I've never tried to provide feedback to Google and been ignored by them. So I just know that sometimes, in my experience, I've had to kind of act a little more upset than I actually am, just so that my opinion will actually be heard. It doesn't excuse being a jerk, but
I absolutely love that, and I'm gonna share a little bit behind the scenes of how some of this stuff works, and I'll be careful what I say because I know both of you are going to be very careful. But basically, Google has their product forum where users are free to go, voice complaints, things like that. They also have their built-in feedback tools. On the product forum, there is a team of rising stars and top contributors, people that have contributed immensely to the product forum and have access to some special levels of access as a result. And one of the things that these people do regularly, and all three of us here are part of that group, James and I for Chrome OS and John for Hangouts, is we monitor issues in the community. We monitor feedback reports that users are voicing across all different platforms, and we compile that in ways that the community managers that work for Google can then pass on to the team. And a good example of this working is actually the recent change to Chrome OS that puts the About page for Chrome OS hidden at the very bottom of the settings window. And it's hard to find. A lot of users are upset. We've been monitoring the situation. I personally watched Google Plus and Reddit for all the feedback, compiled a lot of it, and others would pitch in as they saw it and found it. We passed that along. Andrea, our community manager, made sure the team read it, and the team is now making changes so that in the next stable version of Chrome OS, whether it be milestone 39 or even a minor update, that will be resolved. They heard the user feedback. As rising stars and top contributors, we collected it. We noted that this is a problem. We got that sent to the developers, and they took care of it. They reacted quickly. So it's very easy to feel like you're not being heard, but the reality is there's a lot of work behind the scenes, and I would like to see a lot of transparency there, but obviously NDAs and some things prevent us from talking about a lot of that. But I will say that before Reddit ever got a hold of this ticket, we were already tracking public reaction to it. I won't mention who picked up on it, but everyone kind of has a thing, and this member really is great about tracking upcoming potential changes that might cause a fuss. So we were already aware of what to expect, and when the Reddit hit the fan, it was just, okay, we can document this, we can pass this along. So we were on top of it, even though we weren't really able to tell people, oh, just give it time, we're going to get an official answer while things are going on. After the fact, sometimes not, unfortunately. So it's easy to feel like you're not heard, James, and I completely understand the desire to scream and stomp your feet to get a response. But for listeners that are listening, there are systems in place in the background. There are people looking out for you. And of course, we don't catch everything, so we do appreciate some of the fuss. We appreciate some of it, but there's no need for direct personal insults or anything like that. Just showing frustration is enough for us to pass along. The quality of frustration doesn't really have a bearing. It's more about how many users are potentially affected, things like that. Quantity rather than quality is usually the metric that Google pays attention to because they're data driven. But we're looking out for it. Okay. I wish I'd say more, but people are looking out for you behind the scenes.
All right, people are looking out for you behind the scenes. And that's absolutely true, though. I think that Chrome OS, and then Chrome before that, and then also Android, a lot of the Google code platforms, a lot of the Google applications that are open source get a bad rap for some of the things that every single open source community has done in the past. You look at the history of Ubuntu, of Debian. There's always been some kerfluffle where someone makes a decision that no one else likes, especially the developer communities. So I'm going to chalk this one up to life. To life. That's what this one's to life. But I say that if you've got a Chromebook, you've got a Chrome OS device, still the future is super bright. I mean, we're talking about literally the smallest of things, where a format that will be supported later on just got dropped. It's just amazing to think that we'd be able to make a whole show out of it. Can you guys believe that? I mean, seriously, Craig, we're literally at an hour at this point.
It's high school drama, John.
It
never ends. If next week it'll be something else. It's always something.
It's file system mama drama.
What's that song? There's a song all about high school drama not ending. I can't remember who sings it. Called High School Never Ends. Craig, you're young. You may have heard it.
Exactly.
It was popular like 5 years ago.
All I know is that it's all about that bass.
I'm not gonna lie. I love that song. I don't care who knows it.
My wife loves it, and the girls now love it, and so.
Bowling for Soup. That's the name of the group that sings that song. It's kind of a one-hit wonder.
I'm all about that bass.
No trouble.
That's exactly right. I only hear it every once in a while from my kids. Anyway, gentlemen, I think Craig, unless you can think of anything else you want to add to this, my final note would be: leave the drama at home, kids. When it comes to work, just get it done. Craig?
Well, I think this is something that's going to be unavoidable until Google gets better at communicating with developers and users and internally. So I hope that lessons can be learned here, but that might be wishful hoping.
I'm with you. James, any thoughts to end episode 40 in the extended file system debate?
No.
Yeah, I'm good too. So throughout the week, besides being in the Google product forums, which we'll have a link to in the show notes, Craig, where can people find Mr. Tumbleson out there on the internet World Wide Webs?
What was that, John? I didn't quite catch what you were trying to say there.
English is hard.
Listen, going through my head right now is nothing but all about that bass. Okay, so please bear with me. And you know what I asked, Craig.
Yes, I do. Listeners can find me on Google+. I used my real name, Craig Tumbleson, in case that hasn't already come up. I don't know if it has or not. So you can find me there, or on Twitter, or not Pinterest. I'm not on that one yet. Or just around. You know what? Just
everybody's on Pinterest.
Instagram?
No, not Instagram, because Facebook owns it. Just go outside and shout, and I'll figure it out.
Hey, I like that. Are you still available on the Google Maps? Can people just Google you, and then you come up wherever you are?
I actually managed to get the entire state of Ohio blurred.
Whoa! I like that. You do have pull at Google.
Well, not blurred from Google Maps, actually. It's only blurred from Yahoo Maps, which happens to power Bing, right? Point being, it was an exercise in making a competitor's project less efficient.
Yeah, there you go. All right. And Mr. Welbus, besides being all about that bass, what do you got going on? Where can people find you?
People can find me in the Chromium code trackers calling Google developers mean names. I'm kidding. That's not me. You can find me on Google Plus, of course, James Welbus. You can also find me at chromebookhelp.info. Please share some ideas with me, things you would like to know how to do on a Chromebook, or things you think other people might want to know, because I have 3 things and I ran out of ideas, so this project is not going well.
You heard the call, ladies and gentlemen.
Give me all the ideas.
Bring him all the ideas.
Do my work for me.
That's right. So I'm John Oliphant, and you've been listening to Practical Chrome or watching it on the YouTubes. I do want to give a quick shout out. We mentioned the maps. Craig talked about blurring the all of the state of Ohio. I had the most interesting conversation with someone at the top contributor event, and that was with the top contributors from the Maps product forum, which was, first of all, incredibly interesting, and number 2, the people there are super cool. I mean, like, super cool. The fact that they take the time to try and resolve border disputes. Like, literally, they get their request from someone in Turkey stating that the border is inaccurate, and then over on, like the India side, they're like, no, it's inaccurate over here. So, like, they literally have to field those calls where, like, and with people that have just gotten on the internet, and they think that, like, literally Google is the internet. So, like, they think that they're arguing with just the right person to make this change. Just a phenomenal two people that I met were awesome, and so I just want to give a shout out to them. They do a great job, in that forum as well. So it was one of those instances when you were like, wow, you literally have no idea, like, how many Google products are out there, and B, how much they touch people. Like, Maps is a big deal, so it was just very interesting for me to see that, and I just want to give a shout out to them, another group of great product forum people out there. So, and again, my name is John. You guys can find us on the webs, on the interwebs, all over the interwebs under Practical Chrome. Check us out, and of course, send us some feedback if you want to. Just pop the contact link at the top of the page, and then that's it for us, gentlemen. If you want to just give a quick bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What? Bye-bye. Craig, no bye-byes.